I'd like to hear a little bit about the Egypt trip.
Right.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, we did just get back from Egypt about 3 weeks ago. Kyle and Ross and I were over there for a couple of weeks. Their first chance to get to Egypt. It was magic trip actually. This one. It all came together very well. We had a few firsts for me. I know there's a lot of firsts for those guys. There's a long list of highlights really for me. I think one of the things that was the most interesting was the surprise I got to pull on everyone on the tour, that Yusuf, the tour guide that we use over there with the Kemet School, who's excellent. We had arranged an extra special permission that we had kept secret, and that was the chance to go down beneath the step pyramid of Djoser, which is at Saqqara, and that's like the entrance to the catacombs. So there's something like 6 or 7 kilometers of tunnels down beneath that step pyramid structure. There's a whole entrance to a massive just labyrinth of tunnels systems down there, and that's also the place that they found more than 40,000 of the precision carved stone vases and jars. And we got to go down several levels below that structure, and actually there's still fragments of these incredible jars all over the place, and you could pick them up and handle them. A lot of them had tool marks, and they're made from all sorts of hard stone materials, and quartz and schist and diorite and all sorts of things. So yeah, I can probably share a couple of photos.
Yeah, for sure.
And that.
While Ben's pulling up photos, the other interesting thing, Randall, about those tunnels down there, we're 5, 6 levels down, is that the walls and the ceiling had crystals, these salt crystals growing out of them. And Yusuf was telling us that when they first were coming down into the tunnels, halite or halite, that they were 12 to 8 inches long, and they cleared them out of there because these things had grown so long and were basically filling the tunnel up with these crystals. It was wild. So I would love to know how long it takes for the crystals like that to form down there. I'm sure it's a function of water and but still, you got to have the right amount of time for those crystals to grow. So lots of indications of great age and interesting things, and including the shards of these stone vases that Ben's about to show.
Can you guys see that? You're seeing my screen shrink. So yeah, the first thing you see when you go down there. So it's not just tunnels. There's also beneath the center of the step pyramid. You can get into something that's called the Persian tunnels. A tunnel dug by the Persians just goes just under the ground, and it takes you to the top of what is this giant open shaft. And this is directly below the pyramid. It's a 100 foot shaft that's cut straight down into the bedrock, and it's 40 feet wide. And at the bottom of it, where we're standing here, you see this giant multi-piece granite box, and it's made up of 32 pieces of granite. And all of these weigh somewhere between 3 and 5 tons. Some of these, maybe a couple, might be a little more. That's down here in the center of the shaft. And when you look up, you can see the internal superstructure of the step pyramid that's been basically built over this massive shaft in the ground. And then, as you go around down through the passages around this, that's where you start to get down into the lower levels of where all these tunnels go off. And it's let me find some examples here. I know I have a couple of pictures of the passages. There's just staircases and spiral staircases and channels and tunnels that lead off all over the place. Here's an example. Just tunnels going everywhere, and you can really get lost down there. In fact, there are accounts of early explorers in these areas, like literally running out of caving rope and having to turn around because they had like a couple of miles worth of rope and string to then, and then they had to stop and turn around because they ran out of rope. But they've done a remarkable job restoring a lot of this and renovating it so that people can get down here. It is like a special permission to get down in here. As you can see, there's still a lot of remnants of what may have been casing stones on the walls.
Yeah, this was interesting here, Ben. Those blocks that are stacked up right there.
Yeah.
I have a picture of the side of them. They have the high relief stars carved into them. So they were ceiling blocks of something.
That's right.
They're way down there. It's like, what are they
stuff down in there?
Well, is it limestone?
Those are limestone. Yeah.
Those are limestone. What is where's this other picture? I know I've got one of like the area. So what is also interesting is that it's not the only thing down there. They had something like these sort of pieces. This is alabaster or white calcite, travertine. There was something like 60 to 70 tons of this material during the renovation taken out from those tunnels down there, and lots of these pieces were like this, where you have what I would describe as fairly well machined pieces of alabaster. A lot of them had things like tubular drill holes in them, and they took up 60 or 70 tons of this stuff out of those tunnels, and they dumped it all behind the step pyramid, and then they basically bulldozed it into a big terrace. Like they literally covered it all up. No one's not sure why they did that, but that was something that happened during this restoration.
That's right. So we walked out to the edge of the terrace and down the side of it, and you could see pieces of it like falling out all over the place from where they had just bulldozed over it.
Yeah, here's a piece that I found, and you can, on the edge of it, you can find pieces like this where it's these big chunks of alabaster that have evidence of work that's been done to them. But of course, down here is where they found 40,000 of these things, like all these hard stone vessels down in the tunnels, and most of them now, like, they're all in warehouses. The ones that are whole, a lot of them are locked up behind glass in the museum. Like these examples, you have some truly remarkable pieces like this. It's just like how they made these is still something of a mystery. I mean, these are made out of translucent forms of stone. Some of them very thin. There are examples of these vases, and Flinders Petrie talks about this as well, but they're, right down to the thickness of a stout playing card. Like they would work these very hard pieces of stone with big crystal inclusions in them, right down to the thickness of a playing card. This vase in particular is one of my favorites. In fact, I have a much better picture of it. I believe I put it in here. Did I not? I thought I did. One second. Let me see. Did I dump it in here?
But yeah, it's wild to look at some of these vases, Randall, and Brad, when you're looking at them, and it's this dark stone, but there will be these huge white quartz inclusions in it.
Yeah.
And yet the whole thing is smoothed off. Yeah, okay, there's a photo of
that's literally shards from these vases.
Wow.
Shards of these things down there.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, in the tunnels, the pictures of the tunnels that you were showing earlier, there's like, a sandy bottom to the tunnel, and you can just basically stick your hand down in there and kind of scrape your fingers through the sand, and you'll pull up pieces of these broken vases.
So it was like a garbage dump underground? They were throwing tailings of carvings?
Well, I think that pile right there is probably done by the archaeologists piling them up.
They're just throwing them in there because there's so many of them.
That's the way they were kind of treating them. If you pick up one off the floor and you're like, wow, look at this, and the archaeologist, yeah, and then you just kind of toss it off
in a corner
somewhere.
I mean, he was one. This is one of my favorite pieces that we found down here, and it's I don't know what type of stone this is. But it's a remarkable piece. Translucent as well. You could shine a torch through this and see the light through it. So it's like almost like a quartz, milky quartz or something. And clearly machine has this, but this is my first chance to really handle these things as well. Again, they're behind glass, and it has an obvious centering mark and a depression from what must have been a lathe, I think.
The other thing that's important when you're able to handle these pieces that are broken, you can see that there's a taper from the base going up the sides. They taper down, and as you rotate it and look, the taper is consistent all the way around, which suggests machining, right? If it was done by hand, the thickness on one side could be more than the thickness on the other, or the taper wouldn't be exactly. But the fact that taper in the thickness going up the side is consistent, it shows that there's a fixed tool. Right, the tool is fixed in a machining lathe situation.
Yeah, it's got
being guided in a specific around. Yes, it has the same symmetry all the way around, and it's being guided in a specific curve to make that. Look at that.
You can see how thin it is.
You can see how thin it is with the break that's been made in the side of this vase. So it's a good example, and just the huge crystal inclusions on this thing. It's super impressive stonework, and there's a whole, story about how these were. How these were found, because you have objects like this one, which is the notorious kind of the schist disc, and this is in the museum, wasn't found beneath the step pyramid, but it was found in a first dynasty tomb of a prince from the first dynasty. So these stone vessels and these interesting objects go back all the way to the first dynasty, and in some cases pre-dynastic. We were talking earlier when I was with the Snake Bros talking about how they found burials that were pre-dynastic. They carbon dated the remains of the humans back to around 12 to 14,000 years old, and in those burials they found stone vases similar to the ones that they found in these periods of Egypt. So it seems like perhaps there was some form of manufacturing. Some of these vases may have come from earlier times. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I wish I should find a picture of it. It might take me a minute, but there's one of my other favorite objects in the museum is this little tube of lapis lazuli. It's a hollow tube made of lapis, and it's just labeled. It's in a display case. It's labeled pre-dynastic, and it's right next to like bone artifacts and like beads and pottery. But it's this like perfectly kind of machined tube of lapis lazuli, which they found in a pre-dynastic site, but because that's where they found it, they label it pre-dynastic, and it's completely out. It's like an out of place artifact that's sitting there. It's like how did that come to be in Egypt pre-dynastic times? There's no quarries for lapis in Egypt. The nearest one's likely in like Afghanistan, and so there must have been trade systems, and then how they created it and made this little hollow tube of lapis with a gold sheath is a mystery. So what you had happen in the third dynasty was Imhotep came along as he was the architect of the step pyramid. He was Djoser. He was the polymath, the genius that came up with medicine. He was like considered one of the great educators and geniuses of ancient Egypt that got it started. He's accredited with designing the step pyramid. He was also accredited with creating these vases. So the mainstream kind of Egyptology archaeological story for how these vases were made. Here's an example of one that's, I'm told, is made of corundum, which is a 9 on the Mohs scale. Quite a large piece, big and heavy. But so there's a scene on the wall that they often use to depict, like, all right, this is how we explain it in the Orthodox space. And this is a scene from Djoser's period in the third dynasty. And you can quite clearly see these guys are working with, rotating weights on maybe a flint tool or something, or they've got their hands in these vases. They're creating these vases. So that, you go to the museum at Saqqara and they say, this is how these things were made, and explained that this happened in the third dynasty. They figured this out. But what they were making were essentially replicas. They were making these things. There's like, when you really look closely at what was going on at this period, it's almost a tale of two industries, of two classes of objects. And so this is the type of thing that was being produced by Imhotep. They were made from alabaster. They were made from much softer materials, from granite, like not made out of granite and granodiorite and things like this. So when you look closely at what they found beneath these areas, some of them were actually quite good, things like this. But you can still see they're not perfectly symmetrical. They're not the same degree of precision or symmetry or fineness as the other vases. They're made from alabaster, which is a softer material. So I think, there's another way to interpret the evidence that we have here, which is, that some of these vases may have been around for a little bit longer, or perhaps a lot longer, and then found precious, found to be sacred by the Egyptians, much as we find them today. And then they started replicating and making things like this. And there's definitely a difference between the two types of objects, between those things and then things like this.
Yeah. When you're walking through the museum and looking at the cases, and they've got them in the same display cases. They'll have the alabaster Imhotep ones.
That's right.
And some clay vessels, the canopic jars like that, alongside these stone. And the difference is clear. The ones that are made out of these hard stones are, they're just absolutely beautiful in symmetry. Like some of them they're round bottomed like that. Exactly.
Yeah. This one sits on like the tip of an egg.
Perfectly balanced. It sits like that, Yeah. But when you're looking at the other ones, the ones that were made by Imhotep and using that other technique, you can just tell. You can stand there and look at them. They're beautiful pieces, but they're not symmetrical. They're clearly lopsided. They did a good job, but it's not like that. The two different kinds of work have a completely different effect on the eye.
Yeah.
God, that piece is awesome.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah, it really is. And the fact that I got better shots of it on a video now. But yeah, it's a remarkable little egg tip thing. It just sits right. It's just so well balanced. I can share a little bit of the video from down there. I don't know if there's other, if we have time to get into any of the other topics. There were so many things that we hit and got into. I mean, the Assyrian, we got down to the Osiris shaft beneath the Giza plateau. One thing we found, Randall, that was really interesting. I'll pull up a bit of video while we chat about this. Was that there is, I know I'd not seen this before, what seems to be very clear evidence that the large limestone blocks on at least a big portion of the causeway of the middle pyramid at Giza is the roof of some structure. There's obviously a cavity below there, because we found in 5 or 6 different spots these little cracks between the big tiles. So when you're on the causeway, you've got these. It all used to be cased in fine limestone, and that's all been quarried and taken. So in some places you have these really big limestone blocks, but in between the blocks there's gaps, and you can push sand into these gaps and it just disappears. The sand just goes away. Like Yusuf's dad showed him to it. Yusuf must be in his 40s. His father showed him these cracks when he was a kid, and they were pushing sand into them when he was a kid, and they'd probably been doing that for, I don't know, thousands of years. It disappears. Like if it was just a crack between 2 stones, that would fill up and eventually sand wouldn't go anywhere. But 5 or 6 places, literally, we have video of this. It's just, you can just tip sand into it and it just goes. Like, it's like, how are we not running ground penetrating radar over this to look to see? Yeah, there must be a cavity down here with a bunch of sand that's been kicked in for 1,000 years. Remarkable. Let me see. Yeah,
it was a fantastic trip. Mind bending, totally awesome. The group was also really great too. Yeah. It's just
fantastic group.
Well, I've never seen the images from the step pyramid. That's what you were showing, right? The big shaft.
The step pyramid.
That is much more fascinating than the Great Pyramid. I'm astounded.
Some of it is, yeah. I mean,
in a lot of ways,
all interesting in different ways. What we were looking at mostly was, is there evidence here for an unknown, level of technology at some point in the ancient past, like an advanced civilization deep in the ancient past? That's really what we were looking at,
And what's your answer?
It seems like there was. I don't have an answer.
I mean, from the quarry, the Aswan quarry and the markings in the quarry walls that don't look like any type of hand tool or any machine we have in modern times.
Well, I agree. It seems to raise more questions than it answers.
Absolutely.
That is just fascinating. I never knew this about the step pyramid. This is, and look at those marks. Those tool marks are fascinating.
Yeah. So I'll pause this in a couple of spots because I know you bros aren't seeing much of the motion in this video.
It's looking good.
It's not too bad.
That's not too bad. Yeah. So it's
good on mine.
Scrolling up here, this is the shaft that I was talking about. Yeah. And so you get
core masonry up there. That's the core. All the way at the top is the
core masonry,
the actual pyramid. The rest of this is below the ground level.
And this apparently is go ahead. No, I was going to say, this is the viewing platform that the Persian tunnel leads you to, and this is where you can normally go to see this. But it's much more difficult to get down to where we are.
I was going to ask if that's what you showed from your previous trip last year with George. You showed it from the top.
That's right.
Okay, now you're down in there. Oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah. And those blocks were lowered down that shaft? Or is that the assumption?
Through that other hole, apparently, was the idea, the hole in the side.
Yeah, possibly. There's I think, I think the step pyramid was built by the Egyptians. I think that was a 3rd dynasty structure. It's rough. It's got wood in it. The wood's been carbon dated to more or less the same time frame. But it seems to me that there's nothing in the step pyramid construction that matches the kind of stuff that we find down here, like this thing, like this giant multi-piece granite box. And you also got to consider the 60 to 70 tons of alabaster that was machined that they pulled out of here. And then, interestingly, there's layers below this, and we got down to what is the bottom, the current, I think it's the bottom layer. They didn't want us taking photos or videos down at this bottom layer. And it wasn't just a case of going down some steps. We were at a couple layers below this, and then took a 40-foot ladder down another shaft to another layer. And in this area, we found big boxes, like the Serapeum boxes, just smaller, but made from alabaster, and had tube drill holes all the way through them. They had perfect interior corners. There was overcuts in them. What seemed to be indication to me of machining marks. So And I don't think any of that stuff's ever really been documented. I think they're still exploring and digging up a lot of the stuff down here. So let me skip forward a bit, and I'll show you some of the halite crystals that is growing off the walls. That might be of interest.
Oh yeah.
And then so this is, I mean, I probably get some more of it here. That was some there. Hang on. Let's see. So this is like the shorter form of it, and then it was, some of them were up to 18 inches long, and they cleaned it all up. There we go. So this is like,
there you go.
The salt crystals just sprouting out of the walls.
That would indicate some moisture seepage.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And time. Lots of time.
Yeah. And then, so tons of rubble still here. And then I want to get to, where's the piece? So I was just fascinated. Like, you just start digging through like pieces of these shards of vases, piled up everywhere.
Yeah, we all became fascinated by it once we figured out that they're just laying in the sand under the feet. All people started digging,
and they're all stone. There's some pottery. They're all stone.
It's there might have been pottery, but every piece I picked up was made out of a different kind of stone. Yeah.
These giant pieces of. Let's see. I know I got some other bits here. There was a couple bits later on that were.
Do you have it where we're shining lights through them?
Yeah, I do. Let me skip forward a bit. I think that's the next video.
Oh yeah, that's where you're looking at them with Yusuf right there at the corner.
Yeah, this was early.
Yeah.
So it's just, you can just see kind of the labyrinthian nature of stuff of these passages in here. Let's see, they were handing me pieces here.
So the big question, were you the only one tour in the country again?
No, I don't think so. No, there was definitely from 2020, there was definitely an uptick in the amount of tourists we saw. But it's still, I would only classify it as being about a third of what it normally is. There's a piece with a tube drill in it. Oh yeah. So here's a bunch
there
more pieces. Look at this. Just pieces everywhere. And the one place that was quite busy was the museum, but it seemed like we had one of those occurrences where we were just like, our crowd was in with all the other crowds, and like the other parts, we like had a bunch of groups just moving together.
Yes.
On one route, and the rest of the museum was empty. But that was the one place where it was like literally really full of people. But other than that, we had a lot of the sites, there wasn't many people in the other pyramids. You always have a little bit of traffic at Giza with the locals. The Egyptians are up there a lot on the weekend. Yeah, look at this. This was a giant piece of, I think what is some form of granite, big stone bowl that's it's been shaped and sort of beaten up pretty badly. But this was we got a sense for just how heavy some of these things are. This was a big, heavy thing, trying to roll it over and look at the bottom of it. And I think
it's got to be really old.
Yeah. You get that sense from it. I think some of this stuff could be remarkably ancient. Let me see if where are you guys? I think you guys are in here. There's Kyle.
There's Kyle.
Yeah, shining,
digging nice ear,
digging in the sand,
stealing precious artifacts, smuggling out of.
Sadly, no.
They were yelling at no souvenirs. Yeah, no. It's you hear Yusuf saying it's forbidden. Put it down. Surrender the piece. People looking at him. He's like, all right, surrender the piece. Put it back.
The archaeologist is standing behind us over there. I can see him in his blue shirt. He's looking.
So we had like the guy that led the excavation for the last and the renovation of this for the last 15 years was kind of guiding us around while we were down here. So it was a real privilege to get down here for me. And just the ability to think that you can handle some of this stuff and see it, as my friend, my buddy Fred. So it was. Oh, here we go. There's Keno. Yeah. So here we go, like shining some lights. You can see here. That's you guys. That's Russ there.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to shine a light and take a photo, so it's not gonna.
Yeah, there you go. So it's.
You can see how they're translucent.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are alabaster.
Yeah,
that's alabaster. But anyway, so there's a look underneath the step pyramid. It's that was really, really cool.
So when
definitely one of the
Excellent.
highlights of the trip, dude. Getting to go down there was amazing.
Yeah, we got 2 hours inside at the end of the tour, 2 hours inside the Great Pyramid in the evening to ourselves with all chambers open. It was fantastic.
Yep. And that thing is, man.
Yeah.
It is amazing on the inside. I don't know. It's just, it's quite mind blowing. And then I don't know, it's like reignited a passion to go back into the history of discovery and how they, who documented what when they were excavating in there, because things were broken into and rubble was removed. And, because you find these aspects inside the pyramid that are just like, what was going on here? And it doesn't make sense. And then you look in the history and you find out, oh, there was actually a large piece of granite right there that must have come from above, and it must have come out of this room. And there's all these details in the excavations. So you have to sort of like go backwards in time and try to put all these pieces in, because now it's all cleaned out. And then in other cases, in the Grand Gallery, for example, they've built all these boxes on the walls that I think are maybe there's like electrical system or something. I don't know what these are, but I've seen older pictures where you can actually see the sides, the slots that go up the Grand Gallery. Now they're covered up. It's hard to inspect them. So it's just, but yeah, I've been really digging into that structure. So yeah, it's the step pyramid and all that stuff was amazing, but still, I mean, the Great Pyramid
is something else.
Is an enigma. Yeah, it's
called the Great Pyramid for a reason.
Yes. And I can't wait to go back.
Yep.
Indeed.